Hello there, and a very warm welcome to another video from Change Tips and Tools. This video is part 4 of the Resource Capacity Planning series with me, Phil, the Brummie that hails from Birmingham, England. And remember, as promised, I will go through this training series as an end-to-end project, not skipping any detail, and I will walk you through step by step on how to build this template for yourself. However, as always, if you can't wait until the end of this training series, you can get a copy of the completed template on the Change Tips and Tools Patreon, and the link can be found in the description. Now, the purpose of today's video is to create our data model in Power Pivot for this resource capacity planning template. And by the end of this video, you will learn about relationships, calculated columns, measures, and KPIs through this data modeling process. So today, we are going to focus on Power Pivot. So on the Power Pivot ribbon here, we're going to look at how we create the calculated columns within Power Pivot, and also how we create measures and KPIs. But also we're going to be looking, before we can do that, we need to build the relationships and model our data within the relationships or the diagram view. So we're going to be looking at that, and then we will build the pivot tables that fundamentally support this summary data up here, as far as the count of programs with demand and so on. And then we're going to create the pivot tables that support this demand information and this cost information, and specifically these 4 charts here. So the demand versus capacity in hours, the cost version, availability, and resource utilization. So that's all going to be covered in this video. So without further ado, let's do this. So we've built that data that drives our demand data and our capacity data, and we set up our static data and our resource data as well. Now, there's still a few things that we need to add to our data model. So if I go to the data ribbon and do queries and connections, at the moment we've got a number of tables here, and I want to add a few more tables to our data model. If I go to static data, we need to have our cross-reference information in our data model, but I need to clean out these blanks before I put it in there. So I'm going to select this table, and on the data ribbon, do from table and range, and we're going to put this into Power Query, and all we're going to do on here is just get rid of the nulls, so we don't have any null values in there. So it's just data, like so. And once we've done that, I'm just going to do close and load to, create a connection only, and add that to our data model. So that's that table now added into our Power Query, where we clean out those null values, and then it's loaded into our data model. The other item that we need to load in there is, if we go over to our holidays here, we need to load this as well into Power Query, get rid of those nulls again, and then load it into our data model. So again, with that table selected, on the data ribbon, do from table and range. Again, I'm just going to change this to a date only format, replace current, and then get rid of those nulls. So select the bank holidays column, untick nulls, and click OK. So that's done. And again, all we're making sure here, if I click the cog, it does not equal null, which is fine. And again, I'm going to do close and load to, create a connection, and then add this to the data model, like so. So we've got our calendar, we've got which defines the range that we're looking at as far as our resource capacity planning. We've got our resources, we've got our capacity data, we've got our adjustments, and we've got our demand data, we've got the cross-reference, and we've got the bank holidays also. Now, also what we need in here is we want to understand in our summary sheet the count of programs and projects and resources that have demand. And the way that I'm going to do that is on this demand query here, I'm going to right click on it and select duplicate. And I'm going to rename this to programs with demand and hit return. And I'm going to select with the programs column selected, I'm just going to right click and remove the other columns. And then with the remove rows, I'm going to do the drop down and select remove duplicates. So it only shows us one instance of each of those programs that has demand against them. So I'm now happy with that. So I'm going to do close and load to. Again, create connection only and add it to the data model and click OK. I'm then going to duplicate the demand column again, do the same for projects. So right click on it, select duplicate, and I'm going to call this projects with demand and hit return. Then you can select the project column, right click on it, remove other columns, and then with the projects column still selected, I'll remove rows, remove duplicates, and again it's only got those projects that have got demand with them. And again I'm going to do close and load to, only create a connection and add this to the data model and click OK. And then finally, one more time, I'm going to right click on demand, do duplicate, let's rename this, resources with demand, get rid of that bracket there. Yeah, that's better. So you've then got this named resources with demand. Now, the only difference here is that we want to count of only name resources. We do not want to include generic resources. But at the moment, with the data that's in this table, we have no way of knowing whether they are generic or they're a name resource. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to do merge queries, select merge queries again from the drop down. So we've got, this is our current table, and then we're going to select the resource table resources. The relationship's going to be based on the resource name, so resource, like so. And I'm going to click OK. And then with the outward facing arrows, I'm going to untick select all columns. I'm going to untick use original column name as a prefix. And all I want to select is generic and tick that and click OK. And I'm just going to filter and say I only want those resources that are not generic, i.e. no, N for no, and click OK. And there you go. And then I can select the resource column, right click on it and say remove the other columns because I don't need them anymore. And again, now I've filtered it only on named resources. Remove rows, just get rid of the duplicates. And again, I've only got a unique listing of those resources with demand against them. And there you go. And again, I'm going to do close and load to, only create connection and add this data to the data model. And I'm going to click OK. And there we go. It's now created those rows. If I close that down. Now, if you don't have the Power Pivot ribbon available, remember that you've got, if you go to File, you go to Options, Customize Ribbon, and just make sure you've got Power Pivot ticked and it's added here. And also on the add-ins here as well, if you look at this as far as the COM add-ins and do Go, just make sure that you've got Power Pivot ticked, and I do here. So I'm going to click cancel there. Just make sure you got those things ticked for Power Pivot ribbon if you don't have it available to you. So I'm going to select the Power Pivot ribbon, and I'm going to select manage. Now what you'll see here is now I've now got all these tables on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly clean up the date column. So each one will have date in as a date and time. So I'm just going to go through each one. So the calendar, I'm going to make sure date selected and make sure that's just a date, like so. Table resources, I don't need to worry about that, but capacity, I'll expand that date column, select it and make that a date only. Capacity adjustment, expand that date column, I'm just going to make that a date only as well. And the demand, the date column again, make that a date only. Don't need it on there. Bank holidays I do though, so again, let's just make that wider, make that a date only, and the bank holidays. And then program with demand, projects with demand, and resource with demand we don't need to worry about. So now I've done that, I'm then going to go into my diagram view. So this is where we now need to create the relationships. So let me just explain the order that we're going to follow before we continue in this data modeling process. Is first, we're going to create our relationships. This enables us to build our calculated columns and measures, etc. And this is fundamental because it enables us also to filter data in one table by columns of data from related tables, which then obviously gives us the ability to do broader data analysis. So first we're going to create our relationships. Then once we've done that, we will create our calculated columns, and then we'll move on to creating our measures, and then finally we will create our KPIs, or in this instance a KPI. So that's what we're going to do through this data modeling process within Power Pivot. So capacity, we're going to add some calculated columns in there, but we can't do it at the moment because we need to create some relationships with the other tables. Specifically, I need to have my capacity adjustments. Let me just move some of these around and expand them out a bit so we can see the names of them. I'm then going to have calendar. Calendar, we're going to put some measures and some KPIs in there on the calendar piece. I then need the demand. So let's just expand that out a little bit, and that's going to we're going to have a couple of calculated columns in there as well. We need X first, so we can filter on programs and projects, etc. against our demand. And again, if I scroll over, I want the bank holidays because I want to be able to do some adjustments against our capacity and our demand based on the bank holidays. And then finally, these, let me just expand them. But again, we don't actually need to create any relationships to these because these are just going to support some summary information on our summary sheet, like so. So now that I've brought these together, let's start creating some relationships between these tables. So firstly, let's take the resources. So as far as the resources are concerned, I'm going to click this and connect it to the resources in the capacity. And I should have a one-to-many relationship here. So an asterisk deems a many relationship and one as a one-to-many. Now, you cannot, within Power Pivot, have many-to-many relationships within Power Pivot. So it has to be a one-to-many or a one-to-one. So just bear that in mind. So we want the one on the resource table where we've got one instance. I'm then going to do the same thing to our demand table. So again, create that relationship. And if I select this, I'm going to move that down there. If I select this here, you can see that it highlights where we've got the relationship in each of the tables. Now, as far as the calendar is concerned, I'm going to drag the date to the date in capacity. Again, one to many, and do the same to demand. One to many. And as far as the bank holidays, I want to drag a relationship to the date in capacity. And I also want to create a relation between the bank holiday to demand. So I've got that one to many relationship. Then as far as this adjustment here, this is where we're making an adjustment to the capacity based on the resource planned holidays or planned absence. And we're going to join it based on the capacity index. So if I drag this, if I drag it from here to here, look what happens. It puts a 1 there and a many there. We don't want that. So I'm just going to right click on that relationship and delete. And then delete from model. Yeah. And then I'm going to drag this to there. So now we've got that one to many relationship, and that's how we want to see it. And then finally, as far as my portfolio expert is, I'm going to take the project and I'm going to drag it to the demand table. And there we go. So I've now created all the relationships I need within the data model. Let me just move that over here so you can see them. And there's our, move these over. Boom. And there's our relationships between the different tables. So now that I've done that, I'm going to select data view. And the first table I want to create some calculated columns against is going to be against the capacity table. So I'm going to go to the capacity tab. And on here, the first thing that I'm going to create is that I've got the resource name, I've got the date there like so, the day name, etc. But I want the skill set in here. And because of those relationships now, I can use this particular formula. I'm going to do equals and I'm going to enter related. So based on a related table, based on those relationships that we've created, I'm going to scroll down to the resource table and I'm going to take that skill set, double click it, and close that bracket and hit return. And it's now found that relationship based on that resource relationship between the resource table and this table. I'm going to double click on the header and I'm going to call this skill set and hit return. The next thing I want to look at is where we've got a value in here. If there's a bank holiday, I want that value set to 0. So we're going to make some adjustments against that initial demand value here. So this one is going to be again related. So I'm going to do equals related, that open bracket, and then on the bank holidays, I'm just going to bring through the description from the bank hols table. Double click on that, close the bracket and hit return. And what this is doing now is where it's found a date match in that hols table, bank hols table, it's just putting the appropriate description. Anything that's blank means it's not a bank holiday. And here I'm going to rename this, double click on the header. I'm going to call it bank holiday, like so. So next thing I need to do is where I've got a description, I'm going to zero out demand. So, and the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to use an if statement and I'm going to check if this is blank. If it's blank, then I'm going to take the demand value as it is. If it's not blank, then I'm going to zero it. So I'm going to do equals. So if I'm going to use the is blank function, and I'm going to do an open square, and what I'm checking is if the value, the bank holiday here is blank. So if it's blank equals true, double click on this true here. Oh, miss, double clicking on the true. So there you go. If I then do a comma, if it's blank, And what I'm going to say here is that pull that value through. Yeah, so I'm going to do an open square, take the value as is. Otherwise, just make it 0 if it's not blank and hit return. So you can see here that's got something in it, so it's zeroed it. So what I'm going to call this is I'm going to call this capacity underscore net a bank holiday adjustment there, so BH for bank holiday. And I'm going to hit return, and just going to make this format as a decimal number like so. Wonderful. Now the next thing I want to do is I now want to create the net capacity, and this is where it looks at whether we've got an adjustment. Now if you remember, within the adjustment table we've got minus numbers in there, so if we add a positive number to a minus number, it then in effect will take away that adjustment from our capacity number here. So again, I'm going to use an if statement, so I'm going to do equals if, and the test that I'm going to do here is if the capacity net bank holiday here, if that equals 0, then I'm just going to put it to 0. I'm going to set the value. However, if it's not 0, I'm going to say capacity net bank holiday plus related, and if I go to my capacity adjustment here, is I'm going to plus that value there. Remember, it's a minus value, and if I then close that bracket like so and hit return, and again I'm going to double click on the header, and I'm going to call this net underscore capacity and hit return. And again, I'm going to make this a format decimal number like so, and there we go. Now the final thing I'm going to do here is, now that we've got what our net capacity is, so we've taken into consideration the bank holidays and any personal holidays or unplanned absence of the resource has now been considered, is I now want to understand what the cost of my capacity is. So what is the cost of it? And the way that I'm going to do that is, again, is using equals open square bracket, choose that net capacity times related, and what I'm timesing is on the resources on the standard hourly rate, and I'm going to close that bracket and hit return, and there it is. It's pulling through the cost based on that hourly rate. And again, I'm going to double click on the header, and I'm going to call this cost and hit return. So that's what we need to do on the capacity. The next thing that we need to create some calculations on is on the demand, and we just need to, again, understand where the bank holidays are and zero out that demand, because we're not going to be working on those bank holidays, and then work out the overall demand cost here. So I'm going to select the demand tab, and again in here I'm going to do equals related like so, and I'm going to take the description, close that bracket and hit return. Again, I'm going to call this, double click on the header, and I'm going to call this bank holiday and hit return. I'm then going to create, now as far as on the demand, I want the net now demand, but minus the bank holiday. So in here I'm going to do equals, again if, I'm going to use the is blank function here, open square bracket, so where bank holiday here, close that bracket, equals true, and double click on true there, do comma. So if it is blank, then I just want to pull through the demand, so I'm going to do open square bracket, select demand, otherwise make it 0. Then I'm going to close that bracket and hit return. And then what I've got here then, ultimately, as far as my demand is concerned, is I've got my net, my net demand value in here. Again, so I'm going to double click on that header there and do net demand, and I'm going to hit return. Again, I'm going to make that a decimal number. And the final thing I want to calculate in here is what my demand cost is. So again, I'm going to do equals. I'm going to do open square bracket, choose net demand times related. And again, if I go to my resource table, the standard hourly rate, and then close that bracket and hit return. And again, I'm just going to double click on the header, and I'm going to call that net demand, like so, and hit return. So those are my calculated columns taken care of within the tables, and just get rid of what is a 2 on the end of there. Let's get rid of that. There we go, that's better. No, I'm calling it the wrong thing. It's demand cost. See, I'm a typical man. I can't multitask. I'm thinking of one thing and I'm not thinking of what I'm doing in the moment. Demand cost. So there you go. I've named it appropriately now. So those are all the calculated columns taken care of. Now we need to create some measures, and we're going to put those measures against our calendar. So the first one we're going to do, so if I select the calendar tab here, like so, and below this divider line here, I'm going to select that row there, and I'm going to start typing total capacity here, this selected, but it'll appear up here, but not here. So if I go total capacity, like so, do colon, then do equals. So this is going to be a sum, open bracket. And if I go to my capacity, I want a sum of my net capacity here, which will give me my total. So if I double click on that, I then do close bracket and hit return. I've now created this measure here based on the total capacity. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to change this to be a format-wise decimal number, like so. Next, I'm going to do the total demand. So again, I'm going to type there, that selected total. Colon equals sum, open bracket. And I'm going to go to my demand table, and I'm going to sum up the net demand here. So double click on that, close that bracket, hit return. And again, I'm going to make that format to be a decimal number, like so. So now that we've got that, I want to work out what my total availability. So that's fundamentally my capacity, my total capacity minus my demand gives me my availability in essence. So so I'm going to start typing. That's selected. Start typing total availability. I'm going to do colon equals. So, and that's going to be open square bracket, total capacity minus an open square bracket, total demand. And I'm going to hit return. And again, I'm going to make that a format decimal number, So next thing I want to work out now is what my total utilization. So one of the things that we want to put in this resource capacity planning is you want to set a target for people to aim for a 75% utilization. We also want to monitor to make sure we're not over utilizing our resources also. So we're going to put a measure in there called utilization, and we'll also set a KPI against that. But we'll do the KPI once we've done all the measures. So I'm going to, again with this column, select this row column, this row selected here. I'm going to type percentage. I'm going to do utilization. I'm going to do colon. And this time I'm going to do an if statement here, because the first thing I want to check, because if there's no value in demand, then I'm going to get an error. So I'm going to make sure I don't get an error here. So if the total demand equals 0, then I'm just going to set this to 0. However, if it's not, then I'm going to divide total demand by total capacity, and that should give me my overall utilization. If I hit return, and again if I set this format to be a percentage, so percentage, and I'm going to get rid of the decimal places here, so I'm just going to right click on that to the right, and again, and there we go. So we don't have any decimal places. So now we've done that, there's two more measures that I want in here before we take care of the KPI, and that's going to be our total cost of capacity and the cost of demand. So again, with this selected, I'm going to do capacity cost colon is going to equal sum open bracket, and then I'm going to go to my capacity here, and I'm going to sum up the capacity cost there like so, and close that bracket and hit return. And again, I'm going to make that format a currency like so, and then let's do total demand cost colon equals sum, open that bracket, scroll down to demand, there's that demand cost calculated column we created, click on that and close the bracket and hit return. And again, I'm going to make that a currency like so. So I've now created all the measures. So I'm going to select save here, because there's no other calculated columns we do in here. Now what I could do is I can right click on utilization and say create a KPI, but let me just close this bar down, and on the Power Pivot ribbon I'm going to select KPIs and do the drop down, do new KPI like so. I'm going to choose that utilization, so you can only create KPIs against measures. So I'm going to choose utilization. This is going to be based on an absolute number. So remember our target I talked about is 75%. So I'm going to do 0.75 and hit return. So that's my target. Now, as I said, I want to guard against not only underutilization and set a utilization target, but we also need to protect against overutilization. So I'm going to select this graphic. So we've got green in the middle, underutilization to severe underutilization, and then we've got overutilization to severe overutilization. So I'm going to select this graphic here, and then on the first value here I'm going to do 0.4, as in 40%, up to 40%. This one I'm going to do 0.75, which is our target, and I'm going to do 1 for 100% there, and I'm just going to leave that at 1.245 as is. And that will then, in fact, what I might do is I'm going to do 1.3, I think, there, like so. So we've now got what our utilization measures are, and I'm going to use this graphic here, and I'm going to click OK. If I go back into manage here, you'll now see there's a little icon against utilization, which identifies that there's a KPI against it, like so. So that is now all the things that we need to do in our data modeling. The next thing that we will do is let me create some pivot tables for our summary sheet, and let's go through those. So let's create let's create a new summary sheet. So I'm going to rename that to be summary, like so. Let's make it blue. So I'm going to right click on that, tab color, let's make that blue, like so. I'm then going to add another, I've got, let me delete that. I'm getting excitable there. I was clicking the plus sign more than once. So, and this will be the, I'll rename this to be the summary support. And this is where we're going to put our pivot tables. So that will then drive those charts and graphics, interactive charts and dynamic graphics that we put on our summary sheet. So within the summary support sheet, I'm going to select C6 here, like so. So anywhere you like, and I'm going to do insert pivot table from the data model, like so. And where I've got that selected, I'm going to do existing worksheet in that cell and click OK. Now what you'll see over here is that if I click the active tab here, there's nothing there because we've got no pivot table information or any data selected from any of the items within the data model yet. So at the moment there's nothing active. So if I select all, you can see by these little icons, these are all the things that we've got within our data model, like so. So what I'm going to select here is if I go to the calendar and expand it, and I take the year and I drop that into row. I then take the month and drop that into month. I then take our total demand here and I drop that down into values, and I take the total capacity and drop that below demand, like so. I'm then going to right click within the pivot table here, and I'm going to do field, so value field settings. I just want to change that number format to be a number, no decimal places, and click OK. Then click OK again. And then going to select the capacity column, right click on that, value field settings, number format, select number, and no decimal places, like so, and click OK. I'm then going to give this pivot table a meaningful name so I know what it refers to. So again, on the actual pivot table analysis ribbon here, I'm going to select the pivot table name, do PVT, then do sum, because it's for the summary sheet, and this is demand versus capacity, and I'm going to hit return. I'm then going to select this pivot table, and I'm going to do control copy, and I'm going to paste it, control V, and then over here I'm going to get rid of total demand and I'm going to get rid of total capacity, and on the calendar I'm going to select it, and I'm going to take the cost this time. So I want the demand cost, total demand cost, and I want the total capacity cost below, like so. And again, I'm just going to right click on here. I'm going to do right click, field value or value field settings, number format, currency, and I don't want any decimal places, and click OK. OK again, and then select the capacity cost column, right click on it, value field settings, number format, currency, get rid of those decimal places and click OK and OK again. So I've now got two of my tables. Next I want, so that'll support my bar chart for demand and capacity in hours, and this will support my bar chart in for demand and capacity in cost. Now I want to show my availability chart here. So again, I'm going to select this. Just do control. In fact, let me give this a meaningful name. Remember, meaningful names are important. I'm going to call this PVT. It's for the summary tab, and this is demand cost versus cap cost, like so, and hit return. I'm going to copy this, control copy, and again I'm going to paste it, control V. Over here I'm going to get rid of demand, I'm going to get rid of capacity, and again I'm going to go back to the calendar table here, and this time I'm going to take the my total availability here. So I'm going to drag that and drop it in the sum, like so. And again, I can do it here. In fact, I'm going to do the drop down, do value fill settings, number format, make it a number and get rid of the decimal places, like so, and click OK. So now we've got that, the next thing that we need is to support our utilization graph within our summary sheet. So again, I'm going to, with this, I'm just going to do control copy, control V, and again I'm just going to take those off, and if I go to my calendar, expand it again, now our utilization, you'll notice, got the traffic lights, because that's where we put the KPI against the utilization measure. So if I expand that, there's that calculated value as far as utilization. So if I drag that down into values, like so, and then remember we set our goal to be 75% within the KPI. So if I drag that and drop that down into values as well, and again I'm going to, on the utilization goal here, I'm just going to right click on it, value fill settings, number format, and I'm going to choose percentage and get rid of the decimal places and click OK. Click OK again. So I now have my those four graphs that we got. Next, I'm going to need just the totals for demand in hours and capacity in hours and the costs. The way I'm going to do that again is I'm just going to take this table here, do control copy. I'm going to scroll over to here and I'm going to put it there. I'm just going to do control V, and then I'm just going to get rid of the year, and I'm going to get rid of the month, and those are the totals there. And again, I didn't name this table, did I? So this pivot table. So again, pivot table analysis. Let's give this some meaningful names. I'm going to call this pivot sum, and I'm going to call this utilization. Return. This one I'm going to call PVT sum hours totals. So I know what it is. I'm then going to take this pivot table, which is the cost information, do control copy, and I'm going to do control paste. And again, I'm going to get rid of the year, get rid of the month. And again, do that for a second. I'm going to rename this. So within the pivot table analysis, I'm going to call this pivot sum cost totals, like so, and hit return. Now finally, on our summary sheet, we want to know what the count of the programs and the projects and the resources are. So again, I'm just going to put another pivot table here. So I'm going to do insert pivot table from data model. I'm going to click OK. And then what I'm going to do is down to here, I'm going to do programs with demand, just shove the value there and it will do a count. I'm then going to expand on the projects, take that, drag it, shove it into the values. And then finally on the resources, I'm going to take that and drop it into the resources as well, into the value here. So I've now got a count of my programs, my projects, and my resources. So based on that now, I now have all the pivot information I need for my summary sheet. So let me do an example of what we're going to do, and the focus in the next video will be building out our summary sheet and also looking at the speedo dial as well in that summary sheet, and we'll create that in the next video. But let me do the first two here. So with this pivot table selected, I'm going to do insert. I'm going to insert the bar chart. Just make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to right click on these field buttons and do hide all field buttons. And then I'm going to select the capacity data series there and do Control 1. I'm going to make the series overlap 100% and the gap width 50% to make them wider. And then on the fill, I am going to say no fill. And then as a border, I want a solid line. And I'm going to select that. Yeah, I want that dark line and make that 2 thickness so it sticks out a little bit there. Wonderful. And then I'm going to click the plus sign here. And I'm going to say I want a chart title. And I want the legend to be at the top, like so. So now let's just give this a meaningful chart title name. So let's move that to the left. Let's move the title to the left like so. And if I select the whole thing selected, do Control X to cut it, go to my summary tab, and let's put that in there and do Control V to paste it like so. Now let's do this one here. So let's get the cost bar chart up there as well. Again, with that selected, I'm going to do insert, and I'm going to do insert bar chart. Again, just make that a little bit bigger. Just right click on the field buttons, hide them all, select the capacity data series, do Control 1, 100% overlap, make the thickness 50% like so. Fill, no fill, the border a solid line, and make that 2 like so. And again, I want a chart title and I want the legend to be on the top like so. So let's take that chart title and make it meaningful. So that's cost of demand, capacity. And again, just move that over to the left. Let's move this over to the right, like so. And again, I'm going to select it, do Control X, get to the summary tab, and let's just paste it there like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down the Alt key so we can get this to snap to the grid. Yeah. And then I'm going to select this chart. I'm going to do design, add an element. I'm going to add data label. So I want it on the outside end. I'm going to select this one for the capacity, available capacity, do home, do B for bold. I'm going to select the cost chart, and again, design, add chart element, data labels, outside end. Again, I can select the top one there and just you can do Control B for make that bold also. So now I've got these two charts. Let's just demonstrate how we can make, based on this, how we can start to see how this is going to start to become dynamic based on our selection. So if I go into my, well, if I just select anywhere on here, I don't even need to go into the summary support sheet, but if I do insert and select slicer here, and I select the data model tab, then just double click, and what I want is the skill set. So if I scroll down to the resource tab here and click skill set, click OK. Let's just move this like so. And if I just change that format to be, it's on the slicer ribbon, make it that. I'm then going to right click on that slicer and select report connections, and I'm going to link it to my pivot. So I want it to drive the sum of cost totals. I want it to drive the demand versus capacity. I want it to drive the cost. I want it to drive that, and I want it to drive the utilization. And if I click OK, and now when I select architect, these charts start to change dynamically. If I select PMO, and you can start to see what we're going to achieve in the next video. So this is where I'm going to bring this to an end. So we've now completed our data modeling, and we're now going to start to build the rest of the summary sheet, and also we'll build the speedo dial as well in the next set of the next video in this series. So I hope you found this informative and helpful, where the focus has been very much on Power Pivot and the data modeler. And if you did find it informative, please remember to click that like, subscribe, and hit that notifications button for future content. I wish you a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video of this resource capacity planning training series. Bye bye now.